history since 1958, when the IEA first international assessment to compare student achievement. At that time, it was mathematics. The aim was to find out answers to key research questions through international comparison, with the hope countries could learn from each other. So during more than 60 years now, IEA has set up comparative studies of education systems across the world to enable a better understanding of the policies and practices that foster educational progress. Today, as you know, international assessments have become an important part of the public debate in education, and they are probably one of the most important tools policymakers and other educational stakeholders have to inform evidence-based decision-making for educational reform. And in this respect, PIRLS is an extremely rich survey, as it has a 20-year perspective with comparable data, which allows us to follow the evolution of the performance of educational systems over a long-term period. Also, PIRLS holds a unique position in the field of international assessment, as it focuses on early learning skills in young students. Indeed, by targeting fourth grade pupils in reading comprehension, this study puts the spotlight on a key competence during critical formative years. Research has constantly shown that developing strong literacy skills at a young age is vital for future academic achievement. Thus, PIRLS provide us with essential data to inform policies and strategies that can have an important impact on students' success. Now it's time to introduce our speakers who are going to present the main results of PIRLS 2021. Aina Mullis and Matthias von Davier. Dr. Aina Mullis is Executive Director of the Timson PIRLS International Study Center and a long-standing member of the Technical Expert Group of the IEA. She is a research professor at Boston College in the Lynch School of Education and Human Development's Department of Measurement, Evaluation, Statistics, and Assessment. Over 20 years with IEA, beginning with TIMSS in 1995 and then founding PIRLS, Dr. Mullis has played a key leadership role in building TIMSS and PIRLS into the global assessment programs they are today. Professor Matthias von Davier is professor in education at the Lynch School of Education and Human Development at Boston College, and he also serves as executive director at the TIMSS and PIRLS International Study Center. Prior to joining the faculty at Boston College, he held the distinguished research scientist position at the National Board of Medical Examiners in Philadelphia. And before that, Professor von Davier was affiliated for 17 years with Educational Testing Service in Princeton, most recently as Senior Research Director and Co-Director of the Center for Global Assessment. So Aina and Matthias will both present you the first major result of the study, and you will see that the results are very informative and are clearly not limited only to rankings. You will be able to choose different perspectives among all these results. And to this regard, Dirk Astet, after Aina and Matthias' presentation, Dirk Astet, the Executive Director of the IEA, will tell you about the key messages for policy and practice just after this presentation. So please note that you can ask questions in the chat during the presentation, so feel free to do it. We will have a bit of time to have a Q&A session at the end of the presentations. So please, Aina and Matthias, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Thierry. Welcome and good day to everyone. I'm very happy to be participating in the release of the international results of the PIRLS 2021 Assessment of Reading Achievement. I'm going to begin our presentation by taking a few minutes to describe the unique aspects of this PIRLS 2021 reading assessment, and I'll summarize the achievement results. Then Dr. Matthias von Davier will describe key results from the rich array of Pearls 2021 questionnaire data about the home and context in which students learn to read. Next. Pearls is the global standard for monitoring reading achievement at the 4th grade. The 4th grade is an important transition point in students' schooling, a time when they should already have learned to read, and now be concentrating on reading to learn. Founded by IDA more than 20 years ago, in 2001, Pearls is conducted on a regular 5-year cycle, making Pearls 2021 the 5th Pearls assessment to date. Pearls has evolved with each assessment, with Pearls 2021 particularly in the history of Pearls, because it marks the transition to state-of-the-art digital assessment. About half the nearly 60 countries participating in Pearls 2021 administered the assessment using the new digital systems. Next. The digital reading assessment included an innovative user interface where students can scroll freely through the longer text using the scroll bar on the right and answer and access the assessment questions from the bottom using the red button to access a question, the black button to hide the questions, and the green progress arrows to go from question to question. This enables students to locate and match relevant parts of these longer texts to the question and consider the two together. Next. In addition, to reflect today's information society where reading, often online, requires sorting useful from useless information, as well as comprehension of what's meaningful, the digital assessment capabilities enabled including tasks based on simulated internet websites, originally labeled e-Pearls. One such task in Pearls 2021 about the importance of the world's oceans included this website about coral reefs, which had an animated map and a video in addition to the text. On the left, the teacher avatar guided the students through the website and asked the questions. 2 more of these e-Pearls tests are available on the IEA. You can participate in the full Pearls experience. Next. All in all, Pearls 2021 was a very ambitious and comprehensive reading assessment based on countries' shared expectations of what types of materials students should be able to read. The Pearls 2021 Reading Assessment Framework, developed together with the participating countries, articulates 2 major purposes for reading, often used by young students, literary and informational, and a range of reading comprehension skills and strategies. In addition, the Pearls countries participated fully in recommending and reviewing the materials and questions in the reading assessment itself. Pearls 2021 consisted of a wide variety of 18 longer literary and informational texts and accompanying sets of questions, as well as 5 online reading tests about science and history topics. Next. As another noteworthy but completely different aspect of Pearls 2021, it is the only international assessment that collected data at the 4th grade during the COVID-19 pandemic. In total, Almost 400,000 students were assessed in 57 countries and 8 benchmarking entities, which were regions of participating countries, such as states or provinces. The pandemic did result in obstacles and challenges during data collection due to school closures. Nearly half the students attended schools where normal school operations were disrupted for 2 months or more. Still, heroic efforts by the PEARLS countries resulted in a successful data collection, even though it took longer than usual, almost 2 years, from November 2020 to June 2022. Extended data collection did result in the lack of strict comparability in achievement results for a small set of countries. Next. Many of the countries, 43 of the 47 countries, were able to assess students at the end of 4th grade according to the PEARLS guidelines. However, 14 Northern Hemisphere countries delayed assessment over the summer into the 5th grade. For the most part, students were in the same schools that had been selected for assessment at the 4th grade, but at the beginning of the 5th grade, students were 6 months older on average than their counterparts in the prior 2016 trend assessment, as well as 6 months older on average than the students in the other PEARLS 2021 countries. And a number of the delayed assessment countries appeared to have an achievement advantage. To provide information about the home and school context in which students learn to read, PEARLS 2021 also included a series of background questionnaires. Extensive analyses of the background questionnaire results detected no differences in the questionnaire data according to the time of testing. And the questionnaire results, which will be presented in a little bit, are based on all 57 countries. Next. Despite the challenges, PEARLS 2021 data collection was successful in providing high quality data. Multiple adjudications were held to scrutinize and evaluate adherence to the PEARLS sampling and data collection standards, with high standards met by the PEARLS 2021 participating countries, similar to the high levels in previous PEARLS assessments. Next. There is evidence of some negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on students' reading achievement. However, the precise degree of the impact in the PEARLS 2021 countries is unknown. According to the students' parents, learning progress was affected somewhat or a lot for 2/3 of the students. However, as an enormous complicating factor, according to school principals, there were substantial differences within and across countries in the duration and types of reactions to school closures. IEA will be delving deeper into the question of the impact of the pandemic as the subject of future research, but because of the wide variation from place to school to school, often this research needs to be conducted together with or by the countries themselves. Now the summary of reading achievement results. First, the good news. Based on the 43 countries that were able to collect data according to the end of the 4th grade schedule, PEARLS 2021 showed that internationally, there are many good readers at the 4th grade. Despite the COVID pandemic, in a majority of these countries, significant percentages of students reached the Pearls international benchmarks. As particularly good news, at least 94% in the majority of countries reached the low benchmark, demonstrating that they could read relatively uncomplicated material and indicating nearly universal literacy in these countries. 3/4, 75% of the students reached the intermediate benchmark, demonstrating the ability to interpret, integrate, and evaluate a variety of text and visual elements in relatively difficult materials. The advanced benchmark is a target for expert readers, but still, the majority of countries had some fourth grade students reading at this level. Next. A number of these countries had high achievement on average. Singapore had the highest average reading achievement, well above the high international benchmark. Hong Kong and the Russian Federation also had average achievement above the high international benchmark. In addition, England, Finland, Poland, Chinese Taipei, and Sweden had average achievement close to the high international benchmark. Next. The gender gap favoring girls continued the pattern from previous assessment. Girls had higher average reading achievement than boys in 51 of the 57 Pearls 2021 countries. On average, across countries, the gap was substantial, 19 points. Next. Now, the not so good news. The trend results show evidence of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic internationally. The upward trends reported in the previous assessment, Pearls 2016, stalled in the Pearls 2021 assessment, with the recent trend showing a dip in achievement internationally. Between Pearls 2016 and 2021, for the 32 countries with comparable data for the two most recent assessments, only 3 countries showed higher average achievement in 2021. 8 had no change, and 21 of the 32 countries had declines. This was a definite reversal in the largely positive trends reported in 2016, shown on the bottom half of this slide, where for the 40 countries with comparable data between the two prior assessments, 2011 and 2016, 18 had higher average achievement in 2016. 12 had no change, and 10 had declines. This is a difference of about 2/3 with declines in Pearls 2021, compared to only 1/4 with declines in Pearls 2016. Now, over to you, Matthias. Next.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Aina, and I'm also very happy to be here and be able to talk to you a little bit more about the context data. But first, let me get really the countries and the tremendous work they went through, and also the work at the IEA offices. And last but not least, the amazing staff at the TIMSS and Pearls International Studies Center. So what we see here today really is the work of hundreds, if not thousands, of people, and of course, many people in the countries who helped collect the data, and the students in the end. Pearls really has, as Aina already mentioned, outstanding context data, and I really want to make sure that we don't forget about this and also look at this really closely. Just because, well, sometimes it gets a little bit not quite forgotten, but takes a second, maybe backseat behind the ranking of countries. But a lot of very interesting information is in the context data, and Aina alluded to that a little bit with the data about the COVID pandemic, for example. Context data makes these types of assessments even more interesting and useful for policymakers, for countries, for regions to better understand how the different groups in the country vary and how their average achievement is. I will take you through a couple of examples of the context data. You will find more in the international report that, of course, will also now be online. I'm going to talk about home background, about school background, and students' background. There's also teacher data, but that is because of the many disruptions and the unknown extent to which school actually was able to proceed as business as usual, or had interruptions and school closings and did some online education. The teacher data is a little bit more complex. However, everything is in the database. Next slide, please. So first I'll talk about the home support for reading achievement. This is essentially what the parents provided, what kind of information they can give us about what happens at home. And it's very important to realize that parents actually matter quite a lot. Next slide. I'm going to talk about the home socioeconomic status. That's a new index that we derived based on research literature. We had the data already in our context questionnaires. We combined them in a new way according to best practice and research, and essentially provided an index that can be used to better understand how the home background relates to average achievement. And as you see, it's a very strong relationship. So we have three categories here. We distinguish between high, middle, and lower socioeconomic status. We have the percentage of students, and all the slides will have the same structure. And we see the average achievement across countries associated with these three levels. So the lower level has an average achievement of 457 points, pretty low. The middle level of socioeconomic status has an average achievement of 501 points on the Pearls 21 scale. And the high socioeconomic status, about 30% of households belong to this group, has an average achievement of 543. If you look at this difference, this is a very large difference. Rainer talked about the benchmarks and how far they are sitting apart. This is a very, very strong association between socioeconomic status and average student achievement. Next slide, please. Another variable that is also based on parents' reports is the early literacy activities before primary school. So essentially, parents tell us what they've done with students, and they tell us how often they were reading, singing songs, telling stories. And we distinguish again three different levels. Parents report 42% to do this very often, 55% to do this sometimes. Very few parents actually say they never or almost never do things like reading to their children, telling stories, singing songs. Again, we see quite a bit of a difference, even though the lowest group is quite small, but still the difference is, again, almost exactly 100 here between the group of parents who do these kinds of activities with their children often versus almost never or never. The sometimes group sits closer, fortunately, to the often group in terms of average achievement with 495 points, and the often group has 518 points, whereas the low group with 418 points is really far below that. So again, it shows that parents matter, what they do, students matter, an extremely important finding, and certainly something that can be replicated over and over again and is valid in all the countries. Next slide. This is a question or a set of questions that talks about what students were able to do when they were joining primary school. This talks about what kind of early literacy tasks they were able to perform. Here we have an almost even distribution across the levels, so not well, moderately well, and very well. And we see somewhat smaller differences. So again, this is a report of parents, what their children were able to do when they joined primary school. Again, this is quite a predictive scale, a variable that actually explains quite a bit. Maybe not quite as strong as the previous ones that I've shown you, but all these variables have a very interesting and substantial association with student achievement and can be analyzed in either individually or in combination to test different types of questions you might have about the data, to explore deeper and go into what kind of factors are associated with average achievement in, I don't know, combination, in conjunction with other variables that you might have on the student level, on the school level. So it's a host of different types of analyses and explorations you can do with this data. Next slide, please. Here's parents reporting how much they like reading. And this is maybe surprising to some. This is really a personal preference. What do you like? Do you like reading? Do you like other things? And even that, maybe for others not so surprising, has quite some association. So parents model what their children are doing. If you see your parent reading, you see your parent enjoy reading, that has an impact. Here we have a pretty big group in the middle that says they somewhat like reading. The ones who very much like reading, students who have parents will say they're very much reading, have an average score of 526. Students who have parents who somewhat like reading have 498. And then the don't like reading group has 479 average achievement. Again, an association that shouldn't be ignored. Next slide, please. So school support and reading achievement. This is about what the principal. Next slide. Here we have a set of questions about discipline, disorderly behavior, bullying. If school principals report that there's almost no problems at all, again, there's highest achievement with 510 points on average. Fortunately, small groups are minor and moderate to severe discipline problems, and they again have lower achievement than students who attend those types of schools with moderate to severe discipline problems have an average expected reading achievement of 465 points. So ones with hardly any problems have an average achievement of 510 points. So again, you see, even at the school level, we have quite an association. Next slide, please. School resource shortages, similar picture here. If you have no resource shortages, the average achievement is 519. This is reported by about 31% of schools. They don't have any shortages. Some shortages is associated with an average achievement of students of 498, and then affected a lot. Fortunately, a very small group with 8%, but again, it shows that, yeah, we should support schools and give them what they need. Schools who have resource shortages and report those to be severe have an average achievement of 472 points, the PULSE trend scale. Next slide. The academic success emphasis is another important scale. So for very high emphasis, 10% of schools reporting this have an average achievement of 525. High emphasis, 58%. Medium emphasis, A third of schools say they have a medium emphasis on school academic success, and their students have an expected achievement of 486 points in the PIRLS trend scale. Again, you see the obvious difference that is true in all these different scales. Next slide, please. And then finally, what the students say themselves. Let's go to the next slide. We have very strong findings here as well. The first scale is how confident students are in reading. And if you think back to the socioeconomic status and the other early slides that I've shown you, again, this is one slide where you see a very big difference between very confident readers with 541 points. 43% of students fortunately say they are very confident. Somewhat confident is 498 points, 35%, and not confident 22 points with 449. That doesn't mean that you only have to tell students be more confident. You actually have to walk the walk and talk the talk, as they say. They have to get experience and enjoy reading, find reading useful for them, and feel that they actually gain and are being helped and become confident. You can't just snip your fingers and make students confident by telling them to be. So we have to work on that, and that has very good outcomes. Next slide. Students like reading is a somewhat weaker association. So being confident shows a stronger association. If they say they like reading, that also helps. But being confident readers more, to say the least. And 18% say they do not like reading, but still are that group. For example, if you would directly compare to those who are not confident in reading, you would see quite a difference in average achievement. Let me keep it at that because I'm kind of on the slow side here. Next slide, please. Yeah, so as Aina already mentioned, PIRLS 21 was really a challenge and countries went through a heroic effort. We really look forward to PIRLS 2026, which is the next assessment in the PIRLS trend history, 25 years of trend. And between 2016 and 26, hopefully we have 2 data points that really allow us to better understand what happened during 21 in the times of COVID. We have a lot of context data relevant to that. We also have a lot of specific COVID questions that Aina mentioned, but again, PIRLS 2026 hopefully is free of those impacts. Next slide, please. So PIRLS 26 will complete the transition to a fully digital assessment, will be very much utilizing the capabilities of a digital environment. You will have different types of more interactive response types. You have more automated scoring checks and quality assurance. Then you can do with paper-based assessments, you can do process data information, you can look at what students are actually doing while they solve problems and while they read. We will have an adaptive design that targets the different distributions in countries better. And we, of course, will also work on evolving these context questionnaires, including things around well-being, etc. Next slide, please. And we're also very excited to announce that there is an option to join a longitudinal study connected to PIRLS 2026, where we would have the same students be assessed a year later. That's not a must, but that's an option for countries, and some countries are very interested in that. We already have experience in teams around the interest in that and how to get this off the ground. This gives you extremely valuable additional data around average growth of students, which groups grow faster and slower in terms of reading achievement over a year of time. And last slide, please. Next. A big thank you to everybody, and yeah, we are 501 people, so wonderful turnout, and back to, I think, Thierry and Dirk.
Thank you very much, Matthias, and thank you very much, Aina and Matthias, both of you, for a wonderful presentation And thank you to have shown the richness of the results of PIRLS 2021, the first results, because there will be, of course, many more to come in secondary analysis in future weeks and months. Thank you again. And indeed, you said it, Matthias, we have many attendees today, so it's really exciting. And we are going to continue with Dirk Asted. So let me introduce our next speaker. And so Dirk will tell you about key messages for policy and practices. Dr. Dirk Asted is the executive director of our association, IEA, leading its high-quality comparative research. He oversees operations, studies, and services, and drives the overall strategic vision. Prior to assuming his current he was co-director of the IEA Data Processing and Research Center. Dr. Asted has an in-depth knowledge of large-scale educational assessment built on years of experience. Dr. Asted is also the acting chair of IEA's Technical Executive Group and co-editor-in-chief of the IEA ETS Research Institute journal, Large-Scale Assessments in Education. So thank you very much, Dirk. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Thierry. And also a big thanks to Aina and Matthias for sharing these very, very interesting results that we've just seen. I'd like to start saying congratulations and thanks to all of you who are in this cycle of PIRLS. From study centers to school principals, teachers, parents, students, Boston College and IEA colleagues, and all of the partners who work on PIRLS. A study like PIRLS is not a small undertaking, and this cycle was especially challenging due to the global disruption of teaching and learning. PIRLS, as we heard, has a unique position in the field of international assessments as its focus on early learning skills in young students. Mastery of language is a precondition for all future learning. If you cannot read sufficiently at the end of grade 4, how can you be successful in learning in all other subjects? It is crucial to have an emphasis on reading skills at this important time in life, not only for learning, but also for active participation in life and society. When it comes to the results, it can be tempting to default on the rankings. But as we've seen today, there's much more in the data. It's much richer. And in my presentation today, I will zoom into 4 findings from PIRLS 2021 and offer some key takeaways at the international level. From Boston College, we know that the vast majority of students across countries demonstrated basic reading skills, which is excellent. However, we also see trends in the 4th grade reading achievement reveal decreases around the world. In fact, as we saw from Aina, it's the first time in the history of PIRLS that we see such significant declines across countries. These results unquestionably show a negative impact from the pandemic. But, and that's I think important, perhaps not as prominent as some might have expected. To put the declines into perspective, the average score point difference across countries that experienced a decline in achievement at 4th grade was 8 score points. During the pandemic, some people talked about a lost generation or a lost school year. Although we don't have good measurement for the learning gain in one school year, the results from PIRLS appear to be more moderate and suggest that countries were able to continue teaching and learning, even though maybe not as efficient as in normal times. Clearly, more research is needed to investigate the so-called learning loss and successful strategies during the learning interruptions. If countries are concerned about the 8 score points average difference in achievement trends, the difference in average achievement across the different levels of socioeconomic status is even more striking. Across all participating countries, students from low socioeconomic backgrounds on average are almost 100 score points below students from more affluent homes. If you compare this with the difference between average achievement of countries, it is clear that there's more difference within than between countries. And the data clearly highlights that the focus must be placed on students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and that more support is needed for the more vulnerable students. To give the score difference some meaning, it may be interesting to know that in Pearls 2016, so our previous Pearls, Denmark administered the assessment at both grade 3 and grade 4, and the score difference was about 46 score points. Similarly, Norway administered the assessment in both grade 4 and grade 5, and the findings show a 42 score point difference between this 1 year of schooling. Unfortunately, it's not an international valid way of interpreting the score point difference. However, with our next cycle of Pearls, as Matthias has shown, we also offer a longitudinal option that aims to assess students 1 year later, so in both 2026 and 27. And this is one of the benefits of the longitudinal options will offer. A finding that also persists across cycles is a gender gap in reading, favoring girls. In 51 out of 57 countries, girls had higher achievement levels. None of the Pearls 2021 countries had boys scoring higher on average in reading achievement. 20 years of Pearls reading achievement, and there remains a constant gender gap. And in some countries, this gender gap is even increasing. So we really need to go deeper into the question, why are boys not doing as well as girls in reading? And what can be done to engage them? My last point is related to the relationship between students' attitudes and higher reading achievement. As we heard also from Matthias, higher average reading achievement and more positive attitudes tend to exist in mutually reinforcing relationships. However, internationally, less than half of the students report feeling very confident or very much liking reading, and fewer boys international compared to girls again. Inspiring positive attitudes to reading and developing confidence in reading comprehension equitably for both girls and boys is pivotal for education systems to improve reading skills over their students. And connected to reading attitudes, it's not only student attitudes, but also parents' attitudes to reading that is associated to higher levels of achievement, as also Matthias has shown. Yet across all countries, only 1/3 of students had parents who reported very much enjoying reading. How can we expect students to like reading if parents don't? It's important to look beyond just schools and home environment factors to improve students' reading skills and advance students' learning overall. Schools might do a great job, but clearly there's also a role to play. Now, all of these results are becoming available, and it's important to make them meaningful and actionable. Reading skills are crucial for all future learning and participation in society, including digital reading skills, as being measured by Pearls 2020. The release of Pearls 21 marks the beginning of much more work and many more publications to come. For many of us, I think its work now starts. And we will be hearing from countries in the panel discussion shortly on what some of their plans are. If I can leave you with 2 steps for future, it would be I encourage you to dive into the data. The Pearls International Database will become available soon, and it's an extremely rich and valuable data source for researchers looking into teaching and learning. Pearls 2026 is open for enrollment, and as presented by Boston College, will bring many new innovations and opportunities for country. So with that, thank you for your attention. I will now pass back to Thierry for the question and answer of this event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dirk, for your presentation and for sharing very clearly all these key takeaways for policy and practices. So thanks again, three of you, for the richness of your presentations. As I said, it's the first result, so many more to come, but then we still have a few minutes for Q&A question. There were questions, some questions already in the chat. Do not hesitate to add in the chat if you have any question. In 12 minutes, we will have a short break, and then afterwards, a panel discussion with 4 panelists from diverse countries. So let me start, and I will try to group some questions, and not hesitate to add some in the chat again. Just maybe it's a first question by Abdenassar: how to reduce the gap between high performance countries and low performance countries? I guess this is a very tricky question. We don't have the magic recipe, but maybe it's the opportunity to say a word about another program which is called LANA. It's more targeting for lower performing countries. Maybe Dirk, you can say some words on how IEA try to better measure competencies in lower performing countries.
Thank you, Thierry. I think there's 2 things I'd like to mention. One is we have the initiatives that you just mentioned called LANA, which is the literacy and numeracy assessment, which is targeted to countries where TIMSS and Pearls is usually too difficult to administer. So it's a stepping stone into international assessment. But I think it's also important to see that we have quite a range within the Pearls participating countries. And what we can see, actually, there's probably not, as you said, a magic wand or a one-fits-all solution. But what we've seen also in the past is that countries who make use of the Pearls data, who analyze the Pearls data, they were able to find ways to improve education in their country. And that's true for higher as well as for lower achieving countries. All of them, when diving into the data, will probably find some keys where they can initiate change in the educational system. Pearls is about learning from each other, see where are the differences and what's related to achievement. And with that knowledge, policymakers, I'm confident, are able to improve education wherever there's possibility to learn from each other. And I think every country has some strengths and some weaknesses. So we can learn from each other. And I think that's the important thing. Pearls is not a competition. It's not about who is first, who is last. Pearls is about learning from each other. That's the endeavor that we want to take. And with that, I think that's, for me, the message. Look into the data, look what others are doing. You can't copy policies, but you can learn from each other. That's what we should do.
Thanks, Dirk, to remind these important principles. Thank you very much for that. Let's try to group some questions about some methodological questions regarding the e-assessment. First is about a question from Ladislao: how simulated internet environments were implemented in the paper version, if any, for now, I guess. And another question is about the mode effect, how they were incorporated in the trends of Pearls. So how the mode effect are related to the trends, and is it safe to say that for countries with statistically significant mode effects, differences between average scores are partly due to mode effects? So, or were this effect corrected for in every country? So that's more for Matthias, but these two methodological aspects on the e-assessment, maybe? Matthias? Or Matthias?
Yes, I'll shortly answer that with a short answer, is that the simulated website 5 simulated website tasks were only in the digital assessment. The 18 longer literary and informational tasks were in both the paper and digital, with carefully matched presentations.
Okay. Yeah, about the mode effect, that is a very catchy word. There is never a single mode effect. That is what we learned over the years from many different experiences. What we've also learned in Pearls again and again is that different questions can become harder or easier, and actually different questions became harder or easier also in Pearls 21. So there's not just one number you can subtract or add and then you're done. So what we've done is a statistical adjustment based on best practices that is based on a very elaborate design that allowed us to directly compare equivalent samples who took the paper-based assessment and the digital assessment. We looked at the mode effect across countries, and of course there are some differences across countries in all of that, but there's also a very strong indication of an average difference that can be accounted for and that is controlled for. And that way we are able to maintain an international scale that moves forward into the digital future. Because again, the reality changes, how students are reading and accessing written information changes over time. As Aina mentioned, some new passages are added only to the digital assessment. These types of interactive passages are only possible in the interactive assessment or in the digital assessment. So every time, and you've also seen this in the past, so the past 20 years of Pearls, every cycle of Pearls changed the assessment a little bit, actually to some important extent, because it always reflects the current best thinking and practices around reading assessment.
Thank you, Matthias, and Aina for this clarification. There are some question about, maybe I would group some question about the different factors, how they are related. For example, the question from Karina, do you have information on background patterns? We may assume that parents who really enjoy reading may also be more supportive, may also be more resources, etc. Can you see these patterns and how strongly are they? And another, quite a comparable question from Jan. The children's socioeconomic background seems to correlate with their parents' reading habits. So what do you see where children come from a low socioeconomic background but have parents who read a lot? So it's about how this factor relates. So
yeah, very good question, and also one of the very exciting opportunities to do more research. So this data doesn't go away. This data is public. The first level of reporting tends to work only at the level of looking at overall effects of the background scales or associations of the background scales with overall reading achievement. Then there's a second line, and I think Dirk alluded to that, Thierry alluded to that a little bit, where we are planning special reports, where we are also talking with different researchers who are interested in the data, where there are training sessions to look deeper into these types of data. And these types of associations are extremely interesting. You can do a lot, either in terms of planning multiple background scales with different methods, whether it's factor analytic methods, whether it's latent structure methods, to look deeper into how these combinations of factors or how different patterns are associated with reading outcomes, with reading achievement. So there's one example, we're looking into that, for example, around student well-being right now. So there are many opportunities, and I could talk for hours about all the different wonderful things you can do in terms of analyses that we are planning to do and that we are very excited about. But I'm happy also to respond by emails if there are more detailed questions. I have a long list of things I want to do.
Excellent. Very, yeah, like a teaser for the future studies. It will be very exciting. Thank you very much, Matthias. Maybe there's some questions about enjoying reading. There are a few questions about that. For example, from Ansliwe, what was the main reason for students not enjoying reading? Is the reading material boring? Did you perhaps ask what kind of themes would be of their interest? I think it's time we ask children what they want to read. And you also have another question about generally we don't have enough interesting reading materials for boys. So that's also something about gender differences. So what are your thoughts about that? I don't know, Aina and Matthias or Dirk, who wants to jump in on that? Yeah, Aina?
Well, I would say that, of course, there's lots of things. As Matthias pointed out, there's a mutual increase of reading enjoyment with reading achievement. And being a good reader goes a long way to helping your enjoyment of reading. We, in our assessment, try very hard to have a variety of materials that appeal to more girls, more to both boys and girls, to the extent that people have laughed at. I don't know if you've looked at the migration on the IEA website, but that's around the African continent, following the grass, following the zebras, following the things that eat the zebra. So there are a lot of very interesting things in the assessment, and the students like the materials in the assessment. I know perhaps when we say at the 4th grade, they are supposed to be starting to learn to read to learn. So maybe it's not quite as enjoyable as it was when they were learning and had interesting stories. Now they're having more science, history, maybe not such engaging materials. But I think that the whole access to the internet maybe can help students find some more interactive and interesting things to read.
And if I may chime in just quickly, so we have very good information about, again, the equivalency of the paper-based samples and the digital samples before they take the assessment. So in terms of what they do, where they came from, they are very much the same. But if we ask them after the assessment how much they enjoy reading, there's a tiny bit of an advantage for the digital assessment. So the kids actually it seems like the digital assessment a tiny bit more. So it's an interesting finding. We're still looking into that and digging more into that, but it seems you can make reading more engaging by having different features. And last but not least, we also have an adaptive design. So we try to target the passages to how well students are reading. That also helps with engagement. That's maybe a broader answer, but you have to see what students actually can read and then give them texts that are both engaging from the topic, but as well as from the reading level.
Thank you, Matthias, for that. So, I don't know if Dirk, you have to add on that, or it's okay? Or you can...
Well, just, I think these responses are very covering most of the things. Maybe from a political perspective, what we are seeing is, for example, that in some countries, on top of looking at the schools and what's happening there are also initiatives for parents that they read more and that they read also to their students to get an early start. So there are some countries also taking measures on the parental level and not only on schools. So I think there are opportunities, and I completely agree, it must be engaging, and maybe we should really reflect on what kind of texts we are offering our students. You know, from science achievement, that there was a reflection on if the materials that we provide are interesting for boys as girls as well. Maybe we should consider something like the same and looking at the reading materials that we are providing to the students, if they're engaging for boys and girls. Maybe it would be nice to have some materials that are also more engaging for boys. And I think in Pearls, we have a nice coverage of materials that are obviously interesting for boys and girls.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dirk. Thank you for this additional comments and clarification. So we are running a bit out of time with the Q&A. So I want to thank again our three presenters. They will, of course, stay with us with the next part of this event. We have many more questions, but I guess some of them, and you will see maybe during the panel discussion, we may target some of them and see how our speakers from Denmark, United Arab Emirates, or New Zealand, or Portugal, they could answer to give their perspectives on all kinds of questions regarding, for example, I'm talking about SCS. You have a few questions about SCS and reading, so that's something we will talk about with our panelists just after a short break, so 10-minute breaks. So stay tuned. You will see a video during the break about an example of e-Pearls task. So stay tuned for 10 minutes. You can have a coffee, of course, and tea or whatever, and come back at 14. So 14 past 11 CET and whatever your time. But in 10 minutes from now, see you very soon. And thank you again for free presentations.
In 2021, IEA's Pearls, Progress in International Reading Literacy Study, well established as the de facto worldwide standard for monitoring reading comprehension achievement at the primary school level.
إذن كان هذا تقديم مباشر لنتائج اختبار دولي في القراءة بيرلز 2021. هاد خصوصية بيرلز 2021 هو أنه جاء بعد كوفيد-19. شاركت في هذه الدورة 57 دولة، 400 ألف تلميذ شاركوا في بيرلز 2021. 43 دولة أنجزت الاختبار في نهاية السنة المعنية، السنة الرابعة ابتدائي، و14 دولة أرجأت هذا الاختبار إلى ما بين شتنبر ودجنبر 2021، يعني السنة الموالية، وذلك بسبب كوفيد-19. من بين هذه الدول التي أرجأت اختبار بيرلز 2021 توجد المغرب. تقول الدراسة بأن أثر كوفيد-19 لم يتم تحديده بدقة على التعلمات، رغم أن حسب مديري المؤسسة 77% من التلامذة شهدوا أو كانوا في وضعية إغلاق المدارس لمدة محددة أكثر من 8 أسابيع عرفت توقيف الدراسة بالنسبة ل 62% من التلاميذ المغاربة، في حين في المتوسط الدولي كانت الفئة المعنية بالإغلاق لمدة 8 أسابيع هي 47%. 32% من التلامذة المغاربة تأثر تعلمهم بشدة بسبب كوفيد حسب تصريحات الآباء، في حين أن هذه النسبة لم تتجاوز 22% كمتوسط دولي. بالنسبة للنتائج يمكن القول بأن الدول المعروفة بالتقدم في القراءة في الاختبارات الدولية خاصة بيرلز 2000 حافظت على تقدمها إجمالا، وهكذا نجد أنه في المرتبة الأولى جاءت سنغافورة ب 587 نقطة، ثم تبعتها إيرلندا ب 577 نقطة، ثم هونغ كونغ وروسيا. فرنسا جاءت في الرتبة 32، وهذا ليس مفاجئا لأن حتى في الدورات السابقة كانت تم ترتيبها في المراتب الأخيرة تقريبا، أو لنقل ما قبل الأخيرة. أول دولة عربية كانت هي قطر التي جاءت في الرتبة 43، بعدها الإمارات في الرتبة 44، ثم البحرين في الرتبة 45، ثم السعودية التي جاءت في الرتبة 46. بالنسبة للمغرب جاء في الرتبة ما قبل الأخيرة الرتبة 56 ب 372 نقطة. جاءت بعده في الرتبة الأخيرة جنوب إفريقيا. تقدمت على المغرب مصر التي جاءت في الرتبة قبله ب 378 نقطة، وقبلها الأردن ب 381 نقطة، وإيران ب 413 نقطة. شهدت هذه الدورة كباقي الدورات تفوق الإناث على الذكور. بالنسبة للمغرب كان التفوق ب 34 نقطة، التلميذات حصلنا على 390 نقطة، في حين حصل الذكور تلاميذ على 356 نقطة. للإشارة فإن الدورة السابقة 2016 شهدت هي أيضا تفوق الإناث على الذكور ب 28 نقطة، وبالتالي يمكن القول بأن هو الفارق بين الذكور والإناث أصبح يتزايد سنة عن سنة لصالح الإناث. إذا قارنا مشاركة المغرب سنة 2021 مع مشاركة المغرب في الدورات السابقة، فنرى بأن المغرب حصل هذه السنة 2021 على 372 نقطة، في حين حصل سنة 2016 على 358 نقطة. بالتالي فهو ربح 14 نقطة ما بين 2016 و 2021، علما بأن هذه السنة مشاركة المغرب كانت مخالفة لمشاركة أغلبية الدول، لأن أغلبية الدول 43 دولة أجرت الاختبار كما هي العادة في نهاية السنة الدراسية، في حين أن المغرب إلى جانب 12 دولة أخرى أجرى الاختبار في بداية السنة الموالية بين شتنبر 2021 ودجنبر 2021، بحيث أن التلاميذ الذين كانوا يوجدون في المستوى الخامس في هذه السنة أجروا اختبار المستوى الرابع. لذلك فتحليل الإحصاءات من طرف المؤسسة المنظمة لاختبار بيرلز 2021 يركز بالخصوص على الدول التي أجرت الاختبار في الموعد المحدد. لكن رغم ذلك يمكن القول بأن هناك تحسن في النقط المسجلة في متوسط النقط بين 2016 و 2021. هذا التحسن هو يمكن القول في نفس الاتجاه الذي كان منذ سنة 2011، الذي عرفت هي أيضا 2016 تحسن مقارنة مع 2011 ب 48 نقطة. إذا وتيرة التحسن تقلصت بالمقارنة ما بين 2011 و 2016، لكن لازلنا في نفس الوتيرة الإيجابية لتحسن عدد النقط المسجلة من طرف التلاميذ المغاربة، في حين عرفت مشاركة المغرب ما بين 2001 و 2011 تدهورا في مستوى النتائج المحصلة، بحيث في 2001 حصلنا على 350 نقطة، ثم 2006 تراجعنا إلى 323 نقطة، لنعود للتراجع في سنة 2011 ونحصل على 310 من النقط. المؤشر الثاني المهم في تتبع نتائج المغرب في هذه الاختبارات الدولية، خاصة بيرلز المتعلق بالقراءة في السنة الرابعة ابتدائي، هو نسبة التلامذة المغاربة المتحكمين في الكفايات الدنيا. هذه النسبة عرفت هي أيضا تحسنا، وهذا مؤشر إيجابي، حيث أن نسبة التلامذة المغاربة الذين يتحكمون في الكفايات الدنيا سنة 2021 هو 41%، بعدما كان 36% فقط سنة 2016، بل أنه كان سنة 2011 21%، وهو المستوى الأدنى الذي وصل إليه المغرب طيلة مشاركاته في بيرلز. فهو بدأ المشاركة سنة 2001 وكانت النسبة 33%، في حين أن المتوسط الدولي كان هو 89%. في سنة 2006 26%، والمتوسط الدولي كان هو 90%. ثم انخفض مستوى نسبة التلاميذ المتحكمين في الكفايات الدنيا ليصل إلى 21% سنة 2011، على الرغم من أنه على المستوى الدولي كان هناك تحسن ما بين 2006 و 2011 ب5 نقط، حيث وصل عدد التلاميذ الذين يتحكمون في الكفايات الدنيا على المستوى الدولي 95%. إذا نسجل بارتياح هذا التقدم في نسبة التلامذة الذين يتحكمون في الكفايات الدنيا، الذي وصل إلى 41% سنة 2021، في حين على المستوى الدولي 94%. الإشارة ما بين 2016 و 2021، إذا كان المغرب عرف تطور على مستوى نسبة المتحكمين في الكفايات الدنيا ب5 نقط، فعلى المستوى الدولي كان هناك تراجع في المتوسط بنقطتين، حيث انتقلت نسبة المتحكمين في الكفايات الدنيا من 96% سنة 2016 إلى 94% سنة 2021. أما بالنسبة لنسبة التلامذة المغاربة المتحكمين في الكفايات المتوسطة، فهذه النسبة لا زالت ضعيفة رغم التقدم الطفيف الذي حصل ما بين 2016 و 2021، بحيث انتقلنا من 14% إلى 17%، وهو أقل من التقدم الذي أحرزناه ما بين 2011 و 2016 الذي كان 7 نقط، انتقلنا من 7% إلى 14%، بعدما كنا في خط تنازلي ابتداء من 2001 14%، انتقلنا إلى 9% سنة 2006، ثم 7% سنة 2011. بالإشارة فإن على المستوى الدولي كان هناك تراجع في نسب التلامذة المتحكمين في الكفايات المتوسطة، الذي انتقل من 82% سنة 2016 إلى 75% 75% سنة 2021. إذن أعود وأذكر بأن المغرب حصل على 372 نقطة، احتل الرتبة ما قبل الأخيرة. لكن من جهة أخرى كان هناك تحسن في مستوى نسبة التلامذة المغاربة المتحكمين في الكفايات الدنيا الذي أصبح اليوم هو 41%، وكذلك في نسبة التلامذة المغاربة المتحكمين في الكفاءات المتوسطة الذي وصل إلى 17%. ونضرب لكم موعدا في لقاء آخر لإجراء قراءة أكثر تفصيلا في نتائج المغرب في دراسة بيرلز 2021. إلى اللقاء.